Okay, well, it is 6:01, so I'd like to welcome everybody. Thanks again for coming. I'm Jennifer Shahadi, the Women's Program Director at US Chess. These Thursday night sessions are definitely a highlight of my week, and I'm really excited about tonight's because Tatev Abrahamyan is here, and she is one of the top players in the United States. She's also a member of our Olympic team. She is a women's grandmaster with how many IM norms now?
Many.
All of them. All of them, right. She has all of her IM norms, so she's going to be on IM soon. And she also shares a great passion with me, and I think many of you as well, as I see from your forums, for endgame studies and problems. And that is her topic today. Definitely buckle up because these are not easy. So we are going to have some fun today. And as usual, the chat will be open. If you have any questions to clarify things, you can also private chat me. So with no further ado, Tatev, tell us about why you chose this topic.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so glad we're doing this. I'm so glad all of you are here. I'm really very much looking forward to this session. I'm going to be going over one of my absolute favorite topics is solving chess studies. I love solving puzzles in chess. There are many different kinds of puzzles. There are tactics. There are forcing like forcing checkmates, which a lot of you have done with Katerina Nemtsova. There are endgame puzzles, the strategic puzzles. And as you get stronger, there's a bigger variety. And in particular, I really love doing chess studies, which are very different. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with solving chess studies, and I will talk to you about how they're different. So the studies, there are different composers who really dedicated their careers to doing this. There's some strong players who've done like made in 3 puzzles, made in 2 puzzles, not like, checkmate, but kind of creative mates. And there are some chess players who've dedicated their careers to creating studies. And one of them is Genrikh Kasparian. And I chose him because this is a name I grew up with. He's from Armenia, which is where I am from. And Armenia has a very rich chess culture. So I wanted to not just talk about him, but and just his puzzle. And when I teach, usually I like to talk about some history, and I like to talk about the players, give you some background. So we're not just talking about chess. Genrikh Kasparian, he was never a grandmaster. He was not, the strongest player in the world, but he was an international master. He was a several-time champion of Armenia, but his specialty was creating this puzzles. But Armenia, as I was mentioning, does have a very rich chess history. We have a world champion, which I hope at least some of you know who he is. Maybe you can type it in.
Yes, somebody in the chat.
Tell me.
Do you want to unmute yourself, someone, and tell us what you know about Armenia, a former world champion, perhaps a current very strong player?
That one is not a world champion yet. Oh, Kasparov, there we go. That's a good one. So Genrikh Kasparian, he is half Armenian.
Let's see.
His mother is Armenian. And
hey, Laurel, do you want to unmute yourself?
Hi, yeah, Kasparov and Aronian.
Aronian is not a world champion yet.
Oh, wait, no, yeah, but
I asked about his strong.
Oh, okay. Oh,
yeah.
So Kasparov is a former world champion. He is a legendary world champion. He is half Armenian. But there is another world champion that maybe you guys are not very familiar with. Yeah, Tigran Petrosyan. Does anyone know what Tigran Petrosyan was famous for?
Oh, that's a good one. Anybody know what Tigran Petrosyan was famous for, as I let in 3 new students? Ananya and Violet and say positional chess, and Violet says Python strategy.
What does that mean?
I think that means like to basically like defend and then pounce at some point when your opponent doesn't expect it. Mm-hmm. But maybe that's a good term. It's definitely a nice phrase, Python strategy.
It's not famous for studies, no.
Oh, are you thinking about something more specific than positional chess?
Yeah.
Okay.
Suffocating your opponents, I like that.
Suffocating your opponent.
Python strategy is okay.
Yeah, there's something.
Yeah, so one thing that Petrosyan is was very famous for is specifically rook exchange sacrifice, excuse me, and not exchange sacrifice, I sacrifice my exchange and 3 moves later I'm checkmating my opponent, but very long-term exchange sacrificing, positional, like sometimes for defense. He was a very good defensive player. So that's when, if you ever done like studied exchange sacrifices, which is something I'm not very good at, which is surprises my coach a lot. Like exchange sacrifice, I think it's a difficult thing to do because like this kind of long-term things I think are very difficult. But that's what he was known for. And someone mentioned Armenian. Yes, he is the strongest player from Armenia. He's won basically every tournament except for one, and many time leader of our Olympic team, bringing a lot of gold medals to Armenia. No, he's like the pride of Armenia, basically. And in Armenia, we also, Armenia is a very, very rich, we have a very rich chess culture. We have a chess club, well, we call it Shakhmatitun, which means House of Chess, which is named after Tigran Petrosyan, which I don't know if Jen has ever played there. Maybe you have, if you're playing in Yerevan.
Yeah, I played in Yerevan twice.
Oh, so you played there then?
Yes, it was beautiful.
So, and then there's a chess school that's named after Genrikh Kasparian, and I think the chess house in Armenia is it's one of my favorite places. I spent like 5 years of my life there when I was growing up and playing chess. One of the first places I visit when I'm there. So I just wanted to give you a little background, and now we can move on to our topic of the day, which is chess studies. So I will give you the position, and I will talk to you about, so you can kind of take a look at it. Don't get overwhelmed by it. It is overwhelming if you're first time doing it, but as we move on and as we talk about more, I think you'll get more used to it. So these are very unusual. So just take a look at the position. Don't get overwhelmed. Don't give me any answers yet. Like if you're about to give me, like when I give a position and someone raises their hand, you cannot give me an answer that fast. So we're going to talk about chess studies and how they're different from usual puzzles. And I mentioned I love doing puzzles and I really love doing studies. I think it's really gratifying feeling when you solve a study because studies are very, very beautiful. They're very creative. So when you're solving a puzzle, like you open a book, some kind of a book, tactics book, you look at a position, it looks like a normal chess position and, there's some logic to it. There's, the position that you had in front of you, you'll look at it and you'll be like, yeah, I can imagine getting this in a game. So if you look at this position, this is not something you're ever going to get in a game, but that doesn't mean that this is useless because it's still chess, it's still calculation, and most importantly, it's creativity, which is a really important thing to have in chess. And so let's talk about how studies are different from puzzles and how we should approach them. So the first thing we have to think about in a study, one thing you have to know is every piece is there for a reason. So we're never going to look at a study and then be like, oh, if the pawn wasn't there, it would make like 0 difference in the position. So everything is there for a reason. And like at the end, you'll be like, you understand, like you can look back at every piece and realize the role that it's played making this position happen, the solution happen. So I think most studies don't start with a check, even though there are a lot of exceptions to this, but at least my idea of a good study should not start with a check. And the most important part of a study is you have to come up with some kind of a creative or unusual idea. So it's never like, check, checkmate, or, some very forcing sequence that leads to, I don't know, checkmate or something. It's at some point there's something very unusual, something creative that doesn't normally happen in a chess game. I know it sounds a little cryptic, but as we go through this, you will see what I mean. And that's the part that I really enjoy, like coming up with ideas that you wouldn't normally get to do during the game. And there are different kind of patterns too when you're solving. So I'll give you some hints. So this one is going to be a win. So if you look here, it says plus, which means it's going to be a win. So it's going to be white to play and win. And there are certain patterns that studies have. A major one is stalemate, which does not apply here, but stalemate is a very big pattern, like putting somehow some kind of a sequence that puts you in a stalemate, so the game ends in a draw. This knight kind of forks are very common, like you chase a queen around with your bishop and a knight, with your bishop or with your rook until the queen has nowhere to go, and you do some kind of a fork. And those are kind of patterns that we have. So of course they don't apply here. So let's take a pause here and let's look at the position and let's try to figure out what's going on. So there's several things that you guys or girls should note about this position. So what stands out to you?
Violet says the black king is trapped.
Yeah, so that's a very important thing. So you have to notice that the king is in a stalemate. So whenever we do things like this, and whenever, this is something I do a lot in my classes, and this is something one of my coaches used to do a lot with me, like you summarize the position and you figure out what's going on. But the most important thing is when you mention things about the position, you don't just mention it because I asked and then we move on from it. Like, you know, we don't take that into account. So when you mention that the king is trapped, you have to understand what that means. So that means that the king is in a stalemate, right? So if black is in a really dire position, if they just give up this rook, how will the game end? Okay, so black has a mate threat. So we see a mate threat. Yeah, so you girls are right. So if it's if black is in a really tough position and black gives up their rook, the game will end in a draw because the king is in a stalemate. So if we look at this position, we do see a checkmate, but we also see that white is doing really well, right? You have 3 pieces for a rook, which is a lot, and you have a pawn on h7. So white is doing really, really well here. So you don't want to end this in a draw. You want to win this position because you are doing really well. Yeah, and also keep in mind, so you have this knight on a2, and remember what I told you, and everything I told you, try to keep that in mind as we're solving this. The reason you have a knight on e2 is because that knight at some point will do something. So the knight is not just on a2 just because he was creating a puzzle and he was like, you know what, I just want to put a knight on the board. Where should I put it? Okay, let's put it on a2. No, it's because it's there for a reason. And there's like no extra pieces on the board either. So there's nothing on the board that shouldn't have been there. The knight on f4 would still be captured. Someone is mentioning that. So, okay, so let's start solving this puzzle. So your opponent is threatening checkmate. So what to do? So you have 2 ways, or okay, I guess 3 legal moves that stop the checkmate. So h8 queen is one of them, and bishop e7 is one of them. You can also try bishop e2, but bishop e2 I would not recommend because the pawn will take, and then you're not even drawing this game. You're just gonna lose this game. Okay, so your options are bishop e7 or h8 pawn. Yeah, I mean, sorry, h8 pawn, h8 queen.
E8.
So let's decide between the 2. So a lot of you want bishop e7, so why not queen the pawn? I want to hear a good reason. I heard one good reason for h8 queen, and I lost it. Yeah, someone said, sorry, I forgot who, and I cannot see it anymore. Someone said not queen the pawn because you want to save the pawn. Yeah, because you have a pawn on the 7 rank, and also realize that if you go h8, if you queen this pawn, you will simply win the game, right? If the rook disappeared, you would just win the game. So this is not a pawn we want to lose. Okay, so bishop e7 is the correct move. So I will tell you what happens if h8. So remember what I was telling you about h8. So now you're not threatening any checks. You're not really threatening anything. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give up my rook because as black, I'm just down a lot of material and this position just looks very bad. So let's say you take a pawn. So let's try to find a draw for black. So this is also a study-like solution because oh, I didn't finish. Sorry, I got distracted by the position. So this is a study-like solution because it involves one of the themes that I mentioned.
A lot of people are suggesting rook to d8.
Very nice. And no matter what, you can actually like pre-move rook d1. It doesn't matter what your opponent does. Even if I take on f3, so if I take on f3, you're not going to do something like gf3 and then give yourself a move, right? You will just simply go.
Want to explain that? Let's just explain that for everyone, you know, gf3, yeah, because now... Yeah.
Now you freed your king. Because remember, in the initial position when we mentioned the king is trapped, you want to make sure your king stays trapped. And it's funny, right? Because usually you don't want to have your king trapped because at any check means checkmate. But here you're fighting for a draw, so you want to make sure you don't have any extra moves. And in this position, if white decides to go bishop f3, like again, it doesn't matter what white plays. Instantly, you go rook d1. So this is actually checkmate. So it has to be taken. And now we're in a stalemate. So we don't want to do this. We don't want to give up our pawn. And we also know that this is a study. So, you know, we are looking for something a little more creative. So you already have that in your mind that like you should already have a feeling that h8 should not be it. Okay, so we go bishop e7. So now let's continue with black. What do you think black should do?
Let's see. We've got rook a8 from Ananya. We've got rook d8 from Violet and Tara.
Yeah, I'm wondering if all the rook d8s are for from last time or no, I guess it's from this time. Yeah, so you should continue with rook d8. So black is just trying to get rid of this rook. So now that we already did this once, we'll come back to rook h8 after. Once we see the solution, we'll come back to rook h8 and I'll show you why rook h8 does not work out. So now that you saw this, let's see if you can tell me like few moves in a row, like if you can give me a line, because now we see a pattern, right?
Mm-hmm. Elizabeth and Shreya both say bishop d6.
Yeah. But let's see if someone
As does Vanessa and Violet, Vanessa, Lila. A lot of people saw it right away. Cool.
So a lot of you are saying bishop d6. So bishop d6, you're correct. It's the same thing as before. The rook cannot leave the back rank. So, but again, let's see if you can give me a few moves in a row. So bishop d6, like how many moves can you give me in a row? Like how far can we calculate this?
Joshini so far has the longest line. Bishop d6, rook e8, bishop e5, the little zigzag.
Yeah, I see Joshini. I see Lila also said that. Someone else said that too. I think I missed it. Elizabeth also said it. Can anyone see further than that? Like if you go bishop d6, rook e8, bishop e5, how will this continue?
Bishop e5, rook h8. Ananya gave one more move.
I see Elizabeth gave us a few more moves.
Yeah, rook d8, bishop d4.
Yeah, so bishop d6 is correct. Okay, so a lot of you are suggesting moves like rook h8, going after the pawn, which is logical. Actually, let's try to figure out what will happen if black goes after this pawn. Let's see who can find a win here. Another thing I want to mention is that rules of chess still apply to studies. So if you're doing a study, you know, you have to find like the best move for your opponent too. Because if you win a lot of material and you're just up like a million pieces, but you know, you say, okay, but I didn't do anything beautiful or anything creative, then maybe we didn't find the best solution, right? So my point is, we still want to keep the basic rules of chess in mind. So if we're winning a lot of material and we're going to be up like a million pieces, that's still great. So it doesn't all, that's a solution to a study. So rook h8 is a possible, but let's see why rook h8 does not work out. Bishop f3, then, okay, if you go bishop f3, I will take g takes f3. And the problem is you will lose this pawn. And now we're just gonna start playing normal chess. And then you have two minor pieces. I have a rook, and then you're gonna try to win. I'm gonna fight for a draw. And then it just becomes a normal chess game. So we're just going in a different route. Oh, very nice, Ananya. Yeah, so Ananya, so remember, every piece has a purpose. So now we see a mating pattern.
Can I ask guys, after knight c1, after knight e2, can you just slow down, Tatev, 1 second, after knight e2, what is white's threat here? What can white do? Right, knight g1 mate, really nice, huh? Okay, so pawn e2, bishop e2.
And then we're gonna checkmate the next move.
So nice. So that's great, good job, Ananya.
You can start this way. Depends how you want to do it. You know, you can look at this position and be like, do I want to checkmate?
Which one's better, guys? Which one do you like better, bishop e2 or knight e2?
Probably this one. Because king and a knight next to each other, I think aesthetically it's better.
I agree. That one is even prettier. Okay, but I guess it's just a matter of taste.
Okay, but now we see a mating pattern, right? So now we see a winning idea. So it's very good to, like, when you're solving studies, it's very good to look at it and then, like, envision something. Like, you can envision a stalemate, or, Like if you know the answer is a draw, I mean, so it's going to be a draw, like you envision a stalemate, or if you know you have to win, you see some kind of a checkmate, you see some kind of if this goes there, then I have the stalemate, like you see some kind of an idea and then you try to get there. Doesn't mean your idea will always be right. I mean, that's chess, right? Sometimes our ideas are bad. But it's good to visualize these things because they can be very helpful. Okay, so black basically has to keep threatening checkmate. So black has to keep making a threat, otherwise you have this idea. And also you're threatening to queen, so the rook cannot leave. So black doesn't really have a lot of choices. So black has to continue this way. So a lot of you saw it. So now we're doing this bishop zigzag. Okay, so if you queen, and then of course you don't want to take it stalemate, so you can take on f3. And now basically saying I'm threatening mate again, so you cannot move the rook. So we have to take, and now you're saying, oh, you know, this is great. I've got the two pieces, and your king has a move. But now black plays g4, and it's self stalemate. So there's you have two extra pieces. You can make any move you want. It doesn't matter because black stalemated themselves.
Oh, that is so unfortunate because, like, if your knight was on c1. You could play, well, even that, you know, that would be tricky too. This is a really weird position, yeah.
Yeah, if you play knight e2, you might resign.
You would need to have like your knight on g2, right? And something like that. I'm trying to construct a position where you're actually winning because you have some moves. I don't know.
You need a knight on c1, so you can. No, you can't. There's nothing.
You'd have to have your knight on e1, so you could play knight f3, I guess.
Yeah.
Obviously, that wins. Yeah. This is hilarious though. This is not very typical. Like, this is a really beautiful theme that black gets to self stalemate themselves even with a full tempo from white. Stunning.
Yeah, so for this reason, and this is something we should have considered, right? Because as I mentioned, this is still chess. So if you can win a rook and just be up two pieces, then it's still a win, right? It doesn't have to be a mind-blowing, like the most beautiful thing you've seen. Like if h8 worked, then this would be pretty bad study. So it does not working. So black needs to go for this threat, and white cannot queen the pawn yet. So so we continue this zigzag. So we do this zigzag. So bishop d2, and now rook goes to e1. And this is a critical point in the game because we have a big threat of going rook e1. And rook e1 is checkmate, so you have to take, so you cannot avoid it, and that would end the game in a draw.
There's already been so many beautiful ideas in this study, but the best is yet to come.
So keep in mind, black's next move is rook e1. So don't make a move that allows rook e1 check. So your main goal is not so much to do something yourself as it is to stop your opponent's idea. And this is part of chess, right? Sometimes in chess, you're not doing something, you're stopping your opponent's idea. Okay, so I think majority want to queen, and second most popular move is bishop e2. So both of those moves stop rook e1. Okay, so I see bishop b3. Okay, so h8 queen is too popular. So if you haven't voted, do think about, is h8 queen here any different than playing h8 queen when your bishop was, where was the bishop? On d8. Because if you think about it, if I just go back to our initial position, it's kind of funny how it goes. So this is the same position. The only thing that's changed is the bishop is on d2, right? Everything is the same. It's like black didn't move and white put the bishop from d8 to d2.
We got one right answer already, I think. Yeah, I don't know. She probably private chatted you too. Does anybody want to be unmuted to explain their answer? Alicia?
So on the poll, I thought the right answer, after looking at the poll and looking at this position, I thought the right answer was to play bishop takes f3 because it stops, first of all, it stops rook to e1, and it also, like, it's not that important that for white to have that bishop because that bishop's just kind of not really doing anything, and it sort of makes it so what, instead of thinking more about defending, white can think a little bit more about that passed pawn and probably maybe play like king g1 and not have to deal with that sort of box anymore, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, bishop f3 is a good idea, but it's not the right move. Tatev, did you want to explain why, or should we just move on?
Let's see the correct answer because
Okay.
when I move, it's going to show the move. So yeah, I also got it from Elizabeth. I wonder if Elizabeth is Angel.
Yeah, Elizabeth Sugal, I believe. We have a couple. Elizabeth. Ananya, what about you? What did you pick?
Oh, no, it's not.
I picked bishop e2 because if rook takes e2, then there's h8 queen mate. And if pawn takes e2, then you play bishop e1. And if like rook h8 happens, then you play knight c1, knight e2 idea again. And if you don't play rook h8 and you play like rook d, you still play knight c1, knight e2, knight g1 idea.
Very
And
nice.
they have to take it because bishop f1 mate is threatened.
Very nice. Yeah. So bishop e2. So again, we're stopping rook e1, and that's another way of looking at this position, right? Just stopping the idea. So I'll come back to bishop f3. I'll come back to h8. We'll take a look at all of those. But let's see how bishop e2 works. Exclamation mark. So now you cannot take with the rook. So we're threatening mate, and we cannot take with the rook because of the queen, of queening the pawn. So let's take with the pawn, and now again we're stopping the pawn from queening. We're stopping the checkmate, and now black cannot make a checkmating threat anymore, right? Because the first rank is now closed. You cannot come with the rook to the first rank with a check, and we already established that the rook cannot leave the 8th rank because we're going to queen. So now the rook will go to h8, and we already saw this checkmate before, knight c1, knight e2, and rook e7 with the threat, and knight g1. So we already saw a version of this checkmate, and now we see it again. So I think this is just a stunning answer and a stunning puzzle. So if you girls got it right, even if we didn't call on you or we didn't see it, still good job. So someone mentioned bishop f3. So what was the idea? So after I take, what is the idea?
It was Alicia. I think it's just like in this position, she was thinking that I didn't follow the entire answer, but that you're not trapped anymore because you moved the G pawn forward. So she could play like knight b4 or something.
Yeah, yeah, this is definitely possible. But as I mentioned, now we're just playing chess, right? Because now I take your h7 pawn, and you'll try to win. I'll fight for a draw. I mean, your king is kind of bad, you know, like my rook. I mean, this is just in the normal chess, becomes a normal chess game. So we're just basically starting the game all over again.
Yeah, definitely a good idea, but not as convincing as the beautiful forced win.
Yeah, because if you play like this position 10 times, like I'm not sure how many times you would win. I don't mean you specifically. Like if one played this position with white like 10 times, like how many times would you win it? I think it becomes like more 50-50-ish.
Should we move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm not sure which one you're showing next, but there's 2 more and they're really cool.
All right, so let's start with this position. So, okay, already looks pretty weird. And this is going to be white to move and win.
I do have a poll for this, but I'll let them think about it on their own a little bit first.
So I'll give you girls a hint. So it's not rook b4. So remember one thing I told you, like a good study doesn't start with a check. So
6 of them already voted for rook b4. But that's okay. They can unvote. They can't really unvote, but that's fine. We don't know who voted for what.
I'm just gonna tell you it's not rook b4, just to give you a bit of a hint. And rook b4. By the way, I wrote down the names of the 2 composers that I recommend that you look into. I actually have a video series on some of my favorite puzzles, and they're all Tatev puzzles. And one of them I actually spent days solving. And I think it's really gratifying when you solve a study, and especially a difficult one, because you look back and you're like, wow, what a beautiful creation this was. So if we trade rooks here, you know, like to me, that's like kind of simplifies things a lot. So do keep in mind there's a lot going on in this position. The knight on d1, on b2. I read someone's answer, that's why I said d1. Knight on b2 is hanging. Your rook on a4 is trapped. It's an end game. So this pawn might run away.
Yeah, we can stop the polling. About 50. Last call to get your votes in. Knight b1 was the top move.
Very nice. So your knight is hanging, right? So you have to do something about it. You can't just give up a piece. And there's not a lot of pieces on the board, so we don't just want to lose pieces. So knight d1 is the correct move. And the key is, okay, the rook takes. So the key is what? You cannot take with the king because we're running into this funny checkmate. So black is done material. I simply want to take your pawn. And as I mentioned, right, the rules of chess apply. So if I just take your pawn and I'm up a piece, like I will win the game. So we don't need to go into it too much. So black has to take this rook. And now I think white's next move is very logical. So we got knight c3. So now we're forking. And now, of course, black does not want to just part with their piece, with their rook, and just go down a piece in an endgame. So they go king b4. So now what to do here?
Oh, I've got another poll for this because this is like a really nice one. But I won't waste too much time on this because let's see. This is after king d4.
Yeah, so a lot of you are suggesting king d3 or king d4, so you're right. So you are starting to limit black's moves, and you are putting me in a stalemate, basically. So black is going to start running out of moves. Because if you go king d4, just try to visualize it in your hand, in your head. So if the king is on d4, I'm in a stalemate, right? So I only have two moves, b5 and d6. So now you have to imagine some kind of a checkmate. All right, so a lot of you selected king d4, so well done. Okay, so king d4 was played. And now there are two moves here, either d6 or b5. Black just doesn't, black has two legal moves in this position. So let's take a look at both of them. Do keep in mind, if I go b5, I will be in a stalemate. So you have to come up with something.
Let's see. Knight a4, says Arabella.
Okay, so I'm hearing a few knight a4s. Yeah, so you can take the rook. Okay, and now let's see if you can find checkmate. So it's hard to imagine checkmate here, right? Because it's all pawns. Like you don't have a pawn that could check the king right now. You don't have a pawn on the b file. So now let's visualize. So I would prefer that instead of one move, you could just tell me all the whole answer.
Lila, what do you say?
So you play king c4, they go b5. Then you play king c3, they go b4. Then you go king c5 again, and they have to play b3. Then you take the pawn mate.
Very nice. Yeah, I think this is one of his more famous ones, at least more popular ones. So I've seen this one a lot, and this is a really nice puzzle where you stalemate your opponent and you force them to like basically help mate, right? Because they have no choice but to push this pawn, and then you checkmate them. Very nice. So good job, everyone who found it. And let's go back rather to the other option. So we looked at d6. So now let's take a look at b5.
I think I had an answer for this one.
So I thought knight to e4, and the only move is d6, and then you play knight c5, threatening knight a6 mate, and then the pawn has to take c5 with check, and then you play king d3, the only move is c4 check, king d4, the only move is c3, and then the pawn takes his mate.
Very nice. Very similar to the first one, right? So similar pattern and checkmate with a pawn. So we can compare the two checkmates. One of them is like this, and the other one is like this. So I don't know which one is better. Probably this one, because your opponent has a rook.
Yeah, that's a great
It's better to checkmate when they have more material.
It's even more unusual because they're closer to the center of the board, right? So yeah, great problem. This one's beautiful. They're both beautiful, but I think this last one is, you're in for a real treat. So let's see this one.
Yeah, so I think this one is also difficult, and there's a lot more pieces on the board. So it feels like there are a lot of options, but there really aren't, because the king is in a really tough position. So if you look at the initial position, I think it's easy to get overwhelmed because, when there are a lot of options, it's easy to go wrong, of course, and then you think, oh my God, there's so much calculation to do, because in this position, pawn can take, rook can take, rook can take, so it just feels like there's so much to calculate, but there really isn't. So the key is to find the first move, and then we'll take it from there. So when you look at the king, again, the king looks like it's in a really tough spot. So let's figure it out. So it's white to move and win.
All right, let's see. We got some people starting out. Got a couple good. We got a couple good candidate moves. G4, 98.
That's in 98.
Lila said 98.
Oh.
She private chatted me.
Okay, got it.
King F7 suggested by Alicia. Bishop E6. Bishop C4, G4. I mean, I think she meant Bishop F5 is what she meant. One of them. Yeah.
Yeah, some of you are suggesting G4, but keep in mind that your pawn on G3 has a very important purpose. Actually, the pawn on G3, I'll give you a little foreshadowing, is going to win the game. So your pawn on G3 actually in this position has a very important purpose, is defends the pawn on H4, right? So if you move this pawn, my king will take on H4, and then my king is just not in danger anymore. So we want to make sure this king does not escape this mating net. So 98 I like a lot because 98 carries a threat, right? What is the threat of 98? So the king has to run away, but let's say if I make any other move, like let's say I take a pawn. So hopefully this is obvious to almost everyone. So G4 again, you don't want to go G4. I'm going to take your pawn. So this is mate in 2. So this is no longer like a study, creative something. This is just plain check and mate.
Yeah. Knight E7 says Elizabeth, Ananya, Michelle.
So just checkmate, right? So yeah, so not a lot of options. So as I was saying, in the initial position, it looks like there's a lot of options, but there really aren't because you're threatening mate. So your opponent cannot just do whatever. So the king goes to G6 just to stop this mate for the time being. All right, yeah, this is a good stopping point. So you have a lot of options here.
I know it's complicated. This is the kind of problem that if you really wanted to solve it from beginning to end, like Tatev said, you might have to give yourself like an hour, which obviously we couldn't do because then it would be one position for the whole class.
But it's so satisfying to solve one of those. Like when you spend an hour on a chess puzzle and then at the end you're like, you finally get it, and like after like getting so many wrong so many times, and like especially if the solution is something like really pretty, that's such a great feeling.
So it's really all over the map, Tatev. I mean, I think you see the results too.
Yeah.
Pretty much every move is tried almost in equal proportion. But with a F5 check and Knight G7 being the front runners.
Okay, so let's just move on with the correct answer. So H5 is the correct answer because H5, what does H5 do? It really forces black's hand because you cannot take with the king. We already saw the checkmate, right? So it forces rook H5. So now what's happening is we are starting to limit this king. So we're starting to take moves away from the king. So we took away the H5 square. So the F5 square was taken away. So now this king is just running out of moves. So now let's continue with our plan. Okay, so a lot of you want to play F5, but F5 also makes sense, right? Because now the king is just stuck. So again, you're forcing your opponent's hand, and now rook F5 is played. And now you have your you have a key move here because you have the move you play here is very important. So a lot of you already said the correct move. Those of you who haven't, you can just peek into the chat.
Whoa, everybody's getting it right.
Yeah,
amazing.
And again, like as I said, this is still chess, so we still have to take into account like chess concepts. So important chess concept is stopping your opponent's ideas, right? Because if I give black a move, think about what black would love to do to get out of this grip. Black would love to play g4, right? And then black has a square. And now I have a dark square, so it's very hard for your bishop to get there. So g4 is a very nice move. So now you're threatening both rooks, and most importantly, you're threatening checkmate. So most of you got this right, so well done. So you're threatening bishop f5, checkmate. So I have to move this rook. So of course I'm gonna move this rook with a tempo. So again, you can take my rook, I will take with the king, but now you're gonna be down material because I'll have rook 2 pawns versus your 2 minor pieces. So good luck making a draw there. But here you have a very, very beautiful solution. So let's see if anyone can find it. And again, think about how your opponent might stop you.
So this is the really, the final position. A lot of times it's like one of the earlier positions that's the most beautiful in the study. This time it's really the final position by far. I don't know if that's like a good hint, but bishop f5 check, knight g7 are suggestions from people. Yeah, Lila got it right. Got the whole answer right.
Yeah, if you see it, if you like type the whole answer, because like if you give me one move, I don't know what you've calculated. So if you have an idea, I would like to see the entire idea.
Fantastic, Lila. That's really beautiful. Great, well done. She's the only one who got the whole answer right. Let's see if maybe, because I want to give somebody else the pleasure of finding it. It's a great pleasure. Varnika and Tara both got it right as well. Very nice. Very nice.
I did not see Tara.
She private messaged me.
Oh.
Really good.
Oh, okay. She also. Yeah. So again, think about what your opponent's next move is almost a pre-move because, you know, I mean, like checkmate and I need to make room for my king.
Anybody want to be unmuted to give their answer? Sujana, you still have your hand raised.
So actually I didn't see the answer first. So I saw it in the chat and then worked it out and I realized there was a checkmate. So so the answer I saw was bishop f5, rook takes, and then bishop f5, rook takes, and then I think knight g7. Because after that, if you take on h5, black is checkmated.
Yeah, and I really like this little configuration we have on this part of the board, and black just doesn't have a move because I'm threatening to checkmate. So those of you who got it, really good job. And it doesn't matter which rook you move, I will take the other one. And I just like how everything is just cluttered on one side of the board. And it's just such, I think this is just such a stunning position to end the puzzle and our lesson with.
Yeah, well, this is now the Q&A portion. So if you guys have some questions for Tatev, we have about 10 minutes to ask your questions. And as usual, let me know if you want to be unmuted or if you just want to give your question in chat, because we get through a few more of them that way. Gracie, what's your question?
My question is that, what's your favorite gambit to play?
What's my favorite gambit to play? I don't play a lot of gambits anymore. The most recent one, which has been a few years, has been the Banco Gambit that I've played for a few years. I think it's actually I think that's a very fun gambit to play because I think the ideas are very clear. So you give up a pawn and you know why you're giving up a pawn. The gambit that I played a lot up until I was 2300 is actually I don't know what's the name of it. It's in the Scotch when you go c3, dc, bishop c4.
Yeah, that's the
That's the Scotch Gambit.
Is it just the Scotch Gambit? Because in English, openings have so many I feel like there's so many names for opening. I used to play this for so long, and sometimes in Blitz or Bullet, I still play it, and it's so easy to beat people with this. I would really recommend this. This is such a fun opening to play.
Marissa asks you from the chat, have you ever experienced any gender discrimination in chess, I assume? And if so, how have you combated it?
Like, what do you mean by gender discrimination?
Like well, I think she means, Marissa is in the chat, so maybe she can follow up for you, or I can actually unmute her. I think, she says she can't unmute herself, maybe she's not in an environment where she can unmute. Let me try. Oh, she doesn't have a microphone. Okay. I just think it means like, people underestimating you or not getting something that you would have gotten if you were a boy, anything like that, gender discrimination that you experience.
I mean, it's hard to think of something so specific that really like it was a major turning point. I mean, of course, there've been obstacles. I think one of the major ones is every time I put out any kind of content online, there's always negative comments. And that's something that actually still bothers me because I think the way we deal with kind of things, we kind of tell like content creators to like grow thicker skin and, like don't feed the trolls. And I feel like people who behave badly don't get called out enough, and it just keeps perpetuating the problem. So that's something that really bothers me. Yeah, this is not something that I have to say like I have a good way of dealing with it. I usually just get pretty upset about it, but I guess just deleting the comments is one way of dealing with it. I mean, in life, there's always going to be people who are going to try to put you down and, underestimate you. There's always going to be people against you. So, it's something that we're always going to have to deal with in our lives. So we just, have to keep going.
That's a great answer. Thank you. Let's ask Robin or Sarah, actually. Sarah is Robin's daughter.
Hi. So
Hi.
my question is, oh gosh, I just forgot what happened. So one of my questions is, what is your favorite opening to play?
My favorite opening to play is the French Defense. It's an opening I've been playing my whole life since I was like 9 years old. If you ask my coach, it's not something he's very happy about, but I really enjoy playing it, and it's not the easiest thing to play. There's a lot of difficulties because it's not everyone's style, but I think it's a lot of fun, and I also like facing the Sicilian when I'm playing white.
And also my second question is, what is your favorite thing about chess?
My favorite thing about chess is winning.
Other questions? Did I think I already called on Gracie, right? She was the first person I called on. So we're gonna do different people. Violet, did you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think you said this before, but I missed it. What are some books or compilations of chess studies that you'd recommend?
Books of specifically chess studies. So I actually have a big database of chess studies. I'm not sure where I got it from, but I just have it. So chess, let me look in my books, see if I have it. Like the one that I have, I don't know what your rating is. I think it's very difficult. But try search, like I wrote the names of the composers that I like, that I recommend. So try searching for them and see what you can find. But like, again, I just have this big database that I forgot where I got it from. So I'll just write down the names. And Kasparian actually has a book of, there's one that's 888, I think, like endgame studies. So that's something to try. I'm actually working on one right now, but I think that's very difficult. This one, it says studies for practical chess players. So this one is actually, I don't know if you can see, no, it's like fighting with me, but this one is kind of challenging. So this is not something I would recommend, but I would recommend searching those three composers. So someone asked me, what's my career right now? My career right now is chess, especially in lockdowns. My career is like 100% chess.
I have a question from Jocelyn and Alyssa, if you guys want to unmute yourself.
Okay, hi.
Hey guys.
My question is, what inspired you to play chess, and how did you get so far that you're like a grandmaster now?
What inspired me to play chess was the Olympiad in Armenia. So chess in Armenia, as I mentioned, is very big. So it's in Armenia, like learning chess is like the easiest thing you can do. So now everyone is learning because it's a subject at school. I learned chess very accidentally. I was with my dad at his workplace. He was like cleaning out his desk and he had like a chess set. So I just asked him like, what is this game? Like, what is this? Because, I was a kid and I was bored. And he said he'll promise to teach me. And I learned by watching him play with his friends. And I learned chess in 1996. And so it happened, the Chess Olympiad was taking place in Armenia. And my dad would take me every day to watch the games. And it was just the Chess Olympiad. I just cannot describe what a great environment that is. And it was so amazing for me to be there. That's where the first time I saw Judith Polgar, and I thought just she was like the coolest because she was playing in the men's section. And just my career, my chess just kind of took off from there. And I'm very lucky, I grew up in Armenia in such a big chess environment. I had a great coach and we had very intense trainings. I had like lessons 3 times a week. So that was very helpful. And having a coach is something that has helped me a lot throughout my career. It has made me a little lazy in some aspects because I always rely on a coach, but it has been something very helpful. And I've always had really long-term and great relationships with all of my coaches and everyone I worked with.
That's super cool.
Great questions. Tara asked, what kind of pressure do you feel when you're entering a big tournament? And how you deal with it. And by the way, that's an appropriate question because Tatev is going to be playing in the U.S. Women's Championship in like 3 weeks. So, and there's a lot of money at stake, $100,000 prize fund, and of course, a U.S. Women's Championship title.
What was the question? What kind of pressure I feel?
Yeah, how do you feel when you're entering a big tournament? Do you feel a lot of pressure, and how do you deal with it if you do?
Yeah, I do feel pressure. What I don't like about entering the tournaments, like I just don't like this waiting periods, when you go into the tournament, like an hour before the tournament, especially if it's the first round, I always get the jitters and I always feel like it's my first time playing chess. Like I don't like this feeling, and like I don't like the waiting period, like 5 minutes before the round when you're sitting and like people are coming in and everyone's settling down. Like I just don't like it. I don't have like a good way of dealing with it. I think once the game starts, I just start to feel better because once you start doing what you know how to do, you feel better. I just really don't like this waiting periods. And I think a lot of people don't, because I'm reading Vishy Anand's book and sounds like he doesn't either. So, which makes me feel a little better. But I think once you start playing and you're like, okay, I know how to do this, I think you just naturally start to feel better.
Great. And Abby asks, how have you been motivated to continue practicing playing after difficult losses?
I think difficult losses actually have been very helpful because sometimes, if you're not studying a lot and you still have a good tournament and you're like, oh, I can get away with this. And it you become kind of complacent and you think like, I'm good enough. I don't need to work hard or something. So when you have a tough tournament, it's kind of a tough game. It's a wake up call. So I think it's important to keep perspective. I mean, of course, I had tournaments or losses where I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to play chess anymore. Like I'm so bad. And, I've had tournaments where I've lost like 3 games in a row, 4 games in a row. But I think it's just like the love of the game just basically keeps you going.
And Tara asked what your username is. It's actually in the chess.com link that I sent. And then I think on Twitter, she's Tatev_A, but your generation probably not there very much. Where else are you? You're on Twitch at Tatev_A also. So yeah, you can find her.
Twitter, it's 2 underscores because one was taken.
Okay. So
I don't really play on Lichess. Actually, I've never played on Lichess on chess.com. My username is this.
Anantika asked a good question. Who was the highest rated player you ever won against? I don't know the answer to that.
Highest rated player? I think maybe it was Larry Christensen.
Okay, good one. Larry Christensen. And really, that's interesting because he's like a crazy attacking player. His style has some similarity with yours. You like to attack a lot too.
Yeah, but I beat him in an endgame. Actually, I had a tactic in the middle game, and then I won in an endgame. Maybe he was he's like one of the highest that I've beaten.
Okay, well, Shabalov and Larry are both like 3-time U.S. champions, so yeah, pretty good stuff. And you won against the highest rated player you ever beat in an endgame, so I guess that's very apropos to this lesson.
There we go.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you everybody for joining, and huge thank you to Tatev. I will link to you guys in case somebody missed the link. I'll put it in our group also, her chess.com lessons. And yeah, let's wish her good luck in the US Championship. I'll definitely keep you guys posted.
Good luck.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Have a nice day.
This was
See you
really
guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Good luck.
Bye. Bye.